Hi, good afternoon. Today is October 24th, 2025. It is 1:08 p.m. U.S. Central Time, and my name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and I'm recording this video from my home located at the 26714 Valleyside Drive, Katy, Texas 77494. So I have to apologize for making a third video today. I don't like to do that. I would like to cluster things together into a single video, but this is just too good to delay it. So I kept running the legal vaccine, and it flagged other things, right? And I think this could be nuclear material in a way. So it's about this mysterious Index 7 document that disappeared from the docket, right? Then please see the previous video, and you will see what I mean. It's a mysterious document that nobody knows what it is, but apparently Morgan Hybner knows what it is. So the pipeline flagged. So I have reconstructed from my notes and memory. I have reconstructed from my records. Let's call them unofficial transcripts from the court's proceedings, right? These conversations that happened on the record, and on the September 8th and the September 11th, so September 8th, where was that hearing in which we were negotiating things while I was under the duress of the threat of a psychiatric evaluation that the judge and Morgan Hybner refused to address before the negotiations, right? And the September 11th was the rendition of the verbal orders that was supposed to come after the September 8th hearing. And that was scheduled with only 2 business days in between. So if I had any objections, which I had, Morgan Hybner could object to my objections, saying that I didn't give her proper notice about my objections because there was only 2 days in between the 2 hearings. This is the TTP. So in the September 8th hearing, Morgan Hybner has an exchange with Judge Telfair in which she starts telling him, so the judge asks what is the current situation, and she starts telling him that I'm currently under supervised visitation and that my mother is the supervisor, but that the petitioner has been supervising because my mother is not here. And when I hear that, right, it's super strange to me because nobody told me that I was under supervised visitation. In fact, I have gone to the preschool to pick up the child before September 11, right? Before the verbal temporary orders. I have gone to the preschool to pick up the child by myself, and my former partner has never complained. She has never told me, hey, you need a supervisor. Like, no, this has never happened, right? So I was surprised. In fact, in the appellate court filings, I said this, right, that Morgan Hybner fabricated, misled the court by saying that I was under supervised visitation. Right? I put this in writing to the to the appellate court. Yet Morgan Hybner makes this comment on the record, right? And the judge follows the conversation, right? He doesn't question it. He doesn't question or second guess what more. He takes her word, like he doesn't even ask for a document, right? He takes her word on its face value. So, looking at the debug output of the pipeline, what this looks like is that maybe, and this is a hypothesis, I cannot know until I see that document index 7 that Morgan Hybner must have, right? And I don't have, and nobody else has it. But the hypothesis, let me show you something. The hypothesis is that maybe that restraining order that supposedly is index 7 that disappeared from the docket, it's possible that it contained a supervised visitation clause, right? And by Morgan Hybner mentioning this on the record in front of the judge and the judge following the conversation, it's a way to legitimize those, I would say, they're fraudulent orders, because I was never notified that they existed, and I was never given the opportunity to even respond to that request. There was no hearing. There was nothing, right? So how is it possible that Morgan Heibner obtained such extreme, assume for a second, like I don't know if this is the case because I haven't seen the document, but assume for a second that Morgan Heibner has a temporary restraining order that has a supervised visitation clause. The question will be for the FBI to figure out, I mean, this is a job for the FBI, right? Like, how did Morgan Heibner obtain such a restrictive order against me without me being notified or even called to a hearing, right? I mean, what powerful evidence Morgan Heibner presented to this judge, whoever signed this, right? I don't know who signed it. But if this document exists and a judge did sign it, what evidence Morgan Heibner presented to have an ex parte hearing like that without me even being aware for months that this hearing took place, right? Or that this paper exists. You know, I mean, this, if this is the case, this calls into question the very basic functioning of the US legal system. How is this possible? How can a person like Morgan Heibner can do this to another citizen? Like it would be beyond belief, right? I mean, if this is possible, it means that, you know, there's no law in this country, right? But the interesting thing is that Morgan Heibner makes this, you know, she brings this up on the record. And you know, I look at the thing, and you know, there's the thing that I always say, right? That I look if it checks all the boxes, it checks, right? It checks everything. This would explain why the insistence of Morgan Heibner of putting my mother in the fraudulent temporary order so she draft. Because if she manages to put that in that order, it legitimizes the illegitimate order that she got in April, right? By whatever means. I don't know how she got it. I don't know if it's really a real document. It could be a forgery. I don't know, right? But however she got it, if she has it, putting my mother in the fraudulent draft of September 9 legitimizes that, right? Because then it would be on the record on October 9th, because it would be on the record on the September 8th hearing, right? Where she mentions my mother. So the judge didn't mention my mother. She mentioned my mother, right? But it's in the record now. And it's now in a written order signed by the judge, right? So if anybody looks at the order from April, it would look legit. It would check out, right? It would be consistent with what the record says and what the judge signed. So that would solve that problem for her, right? It also solves the kidnapping problem. I always wonder, right, how they were so confident to keep this child secreted for 50 days, not fearing consequences of a kidnapping charge. The reason could be because she has a supervised visitation order that gives the petitioner all the rights, and she got that since April. Now, they got the child on March 28th, right? If this order exists, it would be dated on April 11th. So they still kidnapped the child, and even if the order is valid, which I think the order is fraudulent, right? Because whatever means they used to obtain it, they didn't follow procedure, and they doctored the docket. I mean, it's obvious, and I'll show you in a second, right? I have proof that they doctored it. So the order is illegit, right? The legitimacy of that order can be called into question easily. But even if it was legit, they still kidnapped the child from March 28 to April 11, right? So the child was still under their control, and they had it secreted, him not telling me where he was, without any order from any judge, from March 28 to at least April 11, right? And if the order is illegit, it would be until May 16, which was the date in which I was able to see him again, right? And I have all this recorded in my logs. So let me show you. Let me show you. But that, so yeah, so that solves that question, right? Why was she so confident? Like, I always ask myself this, right? Like, how was she so confident that she could take that child and not have any consequences, right? That's the reason, because they have something signed by a judge. I mean, that's a hypothesis, of course, right? Now, let me show you. Okay, so I filed an emergency motion. The matter is stay, and this is the other thing, right? Like, because I filed the second motion to recuse, that's why she was almost crying, right? Because she could not deploy the weapon. Because the matter is stayed. I mean, if she wants to seek, or now picket, right? If they want to seek an enforcement order, according to the pipeline, they have to seek it with this judge. I mean, they cannot go judge shopping to another judge trying to get an enforcement for an order that. So, because the matter is stayed, they have to wait for the recusal motion to come back to trigger this enforcement action that they were planning to trigger, right? Based on this fraud. This is a fraud on the docket, right? On the procedure. So anyhow, to disable that, I just filed respondents, and this gives you an idea of the power of the pipeline, right? Like, I filed this in less than 30 minutes that after seeing in the debug output that this index number 7 was suspicious and missing, right? So I filed a motion, an emergency motion, to clarify the docket entries and compel them to produce the signed temporary orders of April 11. Restraining order, right? The temporary restraining order of April 11, right? And here I explain, all the observations. Now, one of the things, and I attached the docket summary as if it was as it is today, right? And you can see here that I'm referring to. Let me give me 1 second. I'm referring to this entry, right? So 411. Let me increase this so you can see better. Right. So this entry, right? 411, April 11. It says temporary restraining order was signed, right? Index 8, but remember the index 7, which should be the proposed order, that according to this sequence that you can see here, it seems like it was a fix to a mistake that didn't really exist. And I explained all this in the previous. But also you can see on 411, right? It says precept, right? E-service, Aguiar Marcano Reynaldo, and it says 4/16/2025 serve. They're saying, so the docket is saying that they serve me electronically, right? But that is not true, and you can see that in 2 places. One, you can see it in the actual order, right? Actually, let's look at something here. When was the date that they set for this hearing? May 15, right? So this was the day that I was, the next day was the day that I was able to see my son again, May 16. So from March 28 to May 16, I did not know where the child was, not even where he lived, right? Nothing. I could not see him. I could not talk to him, nothing. Like, it's a kidnapping, right? But now, if they do have that order, right, even if the order, in some way they can legitimize it, the order was signed on April 11th. So there are 12 days in which they had the child that they had no order, and they took the child for no reason, right? Anyhow, so you saw that it says that I was e-served, right? So the first place where you can see that that's not true is here. You can see in the certificate of electronic service that the only 2 people that were e-served were Morgan Hybner and Tina Simon on the 9th, right? You can see that here. And also, I have a photo of the server that served me the papers physically. This is the guy, right? Because this is the person that Morgan Hybner sent to harass me when I started using Google Maps API to look up the addresses of the agents of Eduardo Cabello, right? And the 7 in Caracas, and also agents of this network in Havana and in Beijing. When I did that, 20 minutes later, this guy showed up and trespassed the property lines, ignoring the no trespassing sign that I have in there. You cannot see in that picture because it's right behind him, right? But there is a big sign, and he ignored that and trespassed and tried to pick up a fight with me. And all this is recorded. And you can see the timestamp here, right? So 4/16/2025. He is physically in my home. This is my home at Lake Point Estates. And that home on the back that you see on the background is the Chinese safe house of the Bonner agent, the 2310 Britton Ridge Drive. So how is it possible that you see this process server on the exact date of service that the docket says, but the docket says that it's not a physical service, but an electronic service, right? So there you can see that is evidence that that docket was doctored. They changed somehow the contents of the docket. You see, it says e-service, Rinaldo. Yeah, that is not true. That is a lie. And also, for them to e-serve me, right, they need to have my email address. And Morgan Hybner asked me for my, Morgan Hybner never communicated with me on my, how do I say this? The email address that I used to e-file is an email address that I opened specifically to respond to this lawsuit. And I opened this email address. This is verifiable, right? We can check when I opened this email account. It's a Gmail account on my domain name, rinaldo.ca. I opened this email account around April 20, right? So how is it possible that she supposedly e-served me on an electronic email address that didn't exist yet? It's just not possible. And the other anomaly that you can see here is that this entry of precept, right, is dated 4/11/2025, but the e-service is timestamped 4/16. So how this entry was created, but the timestamp of service is in the future, right? Like, it's just too many anomalies, right? It's too obvious that this was an entry that was doctored. It was altered to try to make this look okay, right? But it's not, right? It's so I guess, you know, the question I ask authorities is, please try to investigate how is that Morgan Hybner is able to obtain, if she has that temporary restraining order, right? That according to all this picture, it seems like that's the case, and that she was planning to seek enforcement of that. So how is that Morgan Hybner was able to obtain such a restrictive, you know, such an aggressive temporary restraining order against me, or, you know, against an American citizen, without even telling them or calling them to a hearing? Like, how was this possible, right? I think it's a question that needs to be asked, because it's a violation of the most fundamental basis of law and order, right? Like, if we can't, you know, if you can't trust that somebody else will not come out of the woods with a temporary restraining order that got against you months ago without you knowing, how can we sleep at night? You know, I mean, anything can happen to anybody at any moment, right? According to this, right? So I don't know. The problem, of course, is that the matter is stayed, and the docket, it shows that it's clearly being altered and contains multiple contradictions, right? Things that are logically not possible, right? Like the missing index 7. Where is that document? The thing saying that I was e-served, and I have a photo of the server that went to my home to harass me on the orders of Morgan Hybner on that exact date. That the date of service is in the future compared to the entry that mentions the date of service. So how can you make an entry for a date of service, for a service of a document that hasn't happened yet? I mean, this is just not, doesn't make sense. But, you know, going back to the technical conversation, what the pipeline thinks is that that conversation on September 8th on the record of Morgan Hybner and the judge was a way to legitimize this index number 7 and to imply that I knew about it. Because if she's saying on the record that I am on the supervised visitation and I don't object, right, it means that I know. And if I know, it's because she did serve me, right? So even if I say that I was never served, she can pull that record and say, you were served. Look at this conversation. You didn't object this, right? And the other telling thing that the pipeline flagged is this. If you look at the orders of September 11, right, that were verbally rendered, in the judge docket entry, the judge didn't mention anything financial, nothing. There is not one financial thing, which is the basis for my motions for sanctions against Morgan Heibner because she put in the drafts of the temporary orders a bunch of financial obligations. And as you can see in this entry of 9/11, sorry, there were no financial orders rendered. It doesn't say anything about child support. The pipeline infers that this could be by design, right? The reason is that by not mentioning, there's twofold, right? There's two consequences of this in the output. One is this, by not mentioning financial orders on 9/11, it gives legitimacy to the 4/11 order. Why? Because, well, logically, money is one of the most important matters in any divorce, particularly if there's a child. And if the judge is not saying anything about money, it's because it was already taken care of, right? For example, with document index 7, that nobody knows what it is except Morgan Heibner, right? And I say nobody knows what it is because it's not even in the docket, right? You look at the docket, it's missing. It's not there. So that's one of the angles, right? Not putting anything monetary in the 9/11 judge docket entry legitimizes in a way what happened on 4/11, right? Whatever it was that it happened. And secondly, if the judge ordered anything financial here, because these are real temporary orders, right? Like that would be like a temporary restraining order. And that's another question. For how long would those orders be temporary, right? Because if they're going to look for, if they're going to try to enforce anything, we're talking about 6 months after they were signed, right? For how long were those temporary restraining orders that they got, right? That's another important question to answer. But anyhow, if the judge had said anything financial in this 9/11 entry, then it would render invalid whatever was said before, right? By logic and logical legal principles, right? This would supersede whatever was said before because this is the judge that is handling the divorce, right? So that's probably why, right? It always puzzled me why this judge went into these details about, like, picking up a toothbrush at the Britton Ridge Drive house and sending a police officer to pick up the toothbrush, right? But did not address child support in this 9/11 entry, right? It always puzzled me why. It seemed to me like something that was missing, like logically missing, right? And I've been supporting the child, even if he didn't tell me, right? Like the number that Morgan Heibner told me on the 8th, I took that number. She told me, this is what the law says. And I took that number, and that's what I've been depositing on her bank account or giving her a check or whatever, right? But nobody has told me the amount, right? So I'm guessing, and this is me guessing, right, that the amount that Morgan Heibner told me on the 8th is an amount of a lower value than what the temporary restraining orders index number 7, the mysterious missing document that probably she has. So the index number 7 probably has a higher figure, right, than what she told me on the 8th. Probably to make me make a payment incomplete, right, deceiving me, and then seek enforcement. So say that the order of 4/11 said $3,000, and she told me on the 8th that it was $2,400. I don't know, I'm just making up numbers. Right? But if that was the case, and I'm making the payments for $2,400, she can seek enforcement because she can say you are not paying the full child support. And importantly, in her drafts, in the fraudulent drafts that got objected, she put a clause saying specifically something like, incomplete payments of child support will be considered non-payments, something along those lines, right? So the pipeline picked up on this as well and flagged it. And this is me inferring, but I think the play is that whatever she had on 4/11 that was obtained by fraudulent means, right? That document is not worth a penny, but it probably says an amount that is higher than what she told me on the 8th, right? So to then be able to make that claim and be able to seek enforcement and even maybe put me in jail, right, for a few days for not, quote unquote, paying child support. So this is one of those examples when I see the situation, right, and I see all the things they would need to do, and this checks all the boxes. Like, this would be the perfect solution for the problems, multiple problems they have. Of course, now this creates a new problem, right? And is this new fraud, and it's now in the record. So it's not looking great for Morgan Heibner. And and her team, I think. Anyhow, I'm gonna close this one. I'm gonna keep debugging things, and I'll see you on the next one.